As the New York Rangers possibly look to sign a top six caliber forward or possibly a third line kind of scoring forward to provide some really good depth there on that third line, they could look towards a very underrated forward in free agency, and that is right winger Daniel Sprong. This guy played last season on the Detroit Red Wings. Before that was on the Seattle Kraken, but I think would be a very nice, underrated, fairly cheap pickup for this Rangers team who definitely need to add in at least one forward in free agency who could definitely make a pretty good impact on this team. And with this free agent class being pretty solid on the forward side of things there, I mean, there's not a ton of, superstar level guys, but there's quite a few really solid kind of top six, middle six caliber wingers. And Daniel Sprong could go a bit under the radar there, although I don't think he's going to be too under the radar, as I'm sure most teams know how good he actually is. I think he would be a pretty nice, fairly cheap pickup for this Rangers team, who obviously don't have a ton of cap space, got a decent amount there, but I think adding in a guy like Daniel Sprong here could be signing a fairly team-friendly deal, somewhat of a kind of medium to short-term deal, could be the perfect fit for this team. He also is only 27 years old. He turned 27 in March as well, so it's not like he's some 33, 34-year-old guy who's kind of on the back end of his career now. He might not even hit his prime yet, which would be a very nice thing for this team, who obviously is trying to compete for a Stanley Cup. Sprong is a guy who could possibly be put in the top six there alongside guys like Kreider and Zibanejad, and maybe see him have a massive breakout season where he's hitting close to a point per game, which wouldn't be the most insane thing in the world when you take a look at some of his numbers overall. I think he is a very talented player and could be a very nice kind of complimentary guy to star players like Kreider and Zibanejad, or possibly be a very nice kind of depth scoring option on that third line. And we'll take a look at the advanced stats in a bit, but I do think this is truly a player who can actually take a pretty big step up in his overall game. Although the last two seasons he has really kind of shown quite a bit to being a true kind of top six caliber forward, I do think this is a player who could possibly even take a bigger step up in his overall game and really have a massive impact at the NHL level. So we'll take a look at some advanced numbers that kind of show that possibility later on in the video. And something very interesting about a guy like Daniel Sprong is the fact that the last two seasons he has put up some phenomenal numbers, but he's been bounced around quite a bit between lines, kind of going up and down the lineup a bit there, having quite a few different line mates throughout, both of the last two seasons as well. So I think this is a guy who, if he can get consistent time, get a lot more time as well, because he hasn't played a whole lot of average time on ice per game as well, which if that goes up, I think his offensive production probably go up as well, especially if he's playing consistent time with consistent line mates with guys like possibly Kreider and Zibanejad, who are obviously, star caliber players. They are true kind of top six, possibly top line caliber forwards at times as well, especially in the regular season. So I think if he can get consistent time with those kind of guys who are, star caliber players with a lot more ice than he's normally getting, I think he could have a true kind of massive breakout season possibly. I'm not saying he's going to hit like 90, 100 points, but being a lot closer to a point per game is definitely somewhat of a possibility for a guy like Daniel Sprong. When we take a look at the actual numbers, this is a guy who last season mostly played with guys like Christian Fischer, Robbie Fabry, Joe Veleno, and Klim Kostin, who are all fine players, but let's be honest here, they're more of kind of a third line kind of guys who aren't really great kind of true top six caliber forwards, whereas a guy like, obviously, Daniel Sprong, if he gets a chance alongside guys like Kreider and Zibanejad, could have a really great season. So I think having consistent time and more time on ice with guys who are actually star caliber players could really do a whole lot for his game, because he really hasn't, especially the last two seasons, hasn't gotten much of a chance at all to play with true star caliber players. Had a very small amount of time with a guy like DeBrincat, but other than that, has really not played a whole lot with true star caliber players over the last two seasons. And I mentioned it quite a bit throughout this video. I think one line combination we could see for Daniel Sprong, if he were to get signed by the Rangers, is obviously going on that right wing spot alongside Kreider and Zibanejad. But the other option could possibly be putting him down there on that third line and having him play alongside a guy like potentially Philip Hedl, unless the Rangers sign a free agent centerman. I think he's going to be that third line guy more than likely, which would provide some pretty good scoring depth. Having a guy like Sprong in there who was pretty great in that kind of depth scoring role, alongside a guy like Hedl there who would probably shine, like obviously we've seen in the past, on that third line there potentially, as well as have a guy like maybe Brett Berard or possibly one of the top prospects on the Rangers, Brennan Othmann. That could be a really nice kind of third line there. Othmann, Hedl, and Sprong there provide a really good kind of scoring third line there. Might not be the overall greatest defensively, but offensively would be a pretty great third line there, providing some great scoring depth, and hopefully wouldn't be too terrible defensively either. And now taking a look here at what he could possibly bring to the New York Rangers if he were signed. He's got all right size there at 6 foot, 195 pounds. Unfortunately, he is not an extremely physical guy, which is kind of a need for the Rangers. Last season ended up having 32 hits. Season before that, 33. So he's not some extremely physical guy. He's not going to be, bruiser out there, but he's an all right guy out there. Definitely not a soft player by any means, but definitely not too physical. He's a pretty good goal scorer and playmaker as well. He's pretty even in that sense, but definitely has a pretty good underrated kind of scoring ability as well, which would be a very nice thing to add in alongside, obviously, that line alongside Kreider's Bandage, or possibly somewhere on that third line as well. He also is a pretty good offensive producer point-wise at even strength, which is obviously neat for this team. Adding in some good 5-on-5 scoring is definitely what he can bring. And he also wouldn't be much of a penalty killing kind of guy. He's definitely not a great defensive forward, not a liability necessarily, but definitely not a penalty killer out there on the ice. But he would provide a pretty decent kind of addition possibly to that second power play unit if they want to put him there, which would not be the worst idea at all. And now taking a look here at some of the advanced numbers that kind of show that if he were to get more ice time and play alongside some better players, he definitely could have some even better offensive production, which would be pretty great to see if he were signed by the Rangers. Starting off here, this past season ended up having a goals per 60 minutes of 1.18. Then for assists per 60, a 1.64, and for points per 60, a 2.83, which is very, very good. And then in 2022-2023, the previous season with the Kraken ended up having a goals per 60 minutes of 1.67, an assist per 60 of 1.99, and a points per 60 of 3.66, which is quite phenomenal. Those advanced numbers are very, very good. His points per 60, assists per 60, even goals per 60 is very, very good, especially in that 2022 season with the Kraken there. He put up some phenomenal numbers in that limited amount of ice time that he got. And now let's take a look at the actual ice time that he ended up getting with the Kraken as well as with the Detroit Red Wings over the last two seasons, as well as the point totals that he got. This past season with the Red Wings ended up getting 76 games played, 18 goals, 25 assists for 43 total points. 15 even strength goals the last two seasons as well is not too bad, and 16 even strength assists is pretty good, and he did that on only 12 minutes on average per night, which is not too bad at all. Very solid numbers there. 32 hits isn't the best, but it is what it is. His offensive production is quite good, and the previous season back in 2022-2023 with the Kraken ended up having 66 games played, 21 goals, 25 assists for 46 total points. That is very, very good. Had 15 even strength goals there, 17 even strength assists. But the big thing is he did all that in only 11 minutes and 25 seconds per night on average. That is pretty phenomenal there. He had very limited amount of ice time there, playing more like a third or fourth line guy at times, but obviously ended up getting some absolutely amazing offensive production, which is very, very nice to see. He doesn't have to have a whole lot of ice time to get the offensive production done, but that's exactly what he did these last two seasons. And now let's take a look here at what he's done in the playoffs, and he has not played a ton there. He only has in the NHL so far 13 total games played in the playoffs, 3 points, 1 goal, 1 assist, averaging 8 minutes in 58 seconds per night. 17 total hits there in 13 games played. Not too bad, but the ice time is very limited. The offensive production kind of shows that, but he's overall still a very talented player. And I think still going forward, if he gets the actual ice time that he deserves, I think could definitely play a pretty big role. Defensively, he's not going to be great, but offensively, he definitely can have a pretty good impact on this team for probably a fairly reasonable team-friendly contract potentially. And now taking a look here at what my prediction is for Daniel Sprong's next contract. My guess is something around a 2-year deal with a $3 million cap hit. He is a very kind of difficult player to project for. Maybe it is going to be more towards that kind of $3.5 million range on like a short-term deal, but my guess is about 2 years at $3 million. I don't think it's going to be anything too much more than that because he hasn't shown that he can do this at a very good level like he's kind of done the last 2 seasons for really more than that. But this is a player who has done a very good job the last 2 seasons in a very kind of limited sample size and role at the NHL level. I mean, over his entire NHL career so far, his average ice time per game is 11 minutes and 57 seconds. The previous season with the Kraken at 11:25, and this past season had 12 minutes flat. So this is a guy who has not had an insane amount of ice time so far in his NHL career. I think if he gets more ice time, could possibly really take a big step forward. He's only 27 years old, so a short-term deal makes a lot of sense for him as well because, in 2 years he'll be hitting age of 29, so he'd still be fairly young to sign a decent-sized deal, maybe like a 5-6 year deal at a pretty reasonable cap hit. So I think a 2-year deal around $3 million per season is somewhat reasonable. We'll see what happens there. I could be wrong, but we'll have to wait and see what happens throughout this offseason. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, please smash the like button. It helps with the channel a ton. I would really appreciate it. If you are a New York Rangers fan, don't forget to subscribe for daily New York Rangers content. And also don't forget to comment down below your thoughts on Daniel Sprong. What do you think his contract should be? What do you think he'll get? And also, do you want to see him on the Rangers next season? Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next one. Bye.